This disturbing recording was recently acquired by the Scope, and despite DED protests, we believe that the public has the right to know.
This is Hillen aboard Scout vessel Hydrostatic. This is an emergency into an uncharted hundreds of these signal, but we for as long as we can notify the DED. We may be facing a possible major. More and more ships have been arriving at this enormous structure. Detected and it is possible that things to
It has been confirmed that the person speaking is indeed Hillen Tukos, former employee of Eifer & Company. The date of the recording is still unknown. A spokesperson for Eifer claims a search and rescue has already been organized in partnership with the Sisters of Eve. They are offering reward for information leading to the whereabouts of Hillen Tukos and his crew. Officials are urging the population to stay calm as the footage is investigated further. This is Lena Amber, reporting for The Scope.
Greetings, Empyreans, and welcome to Hydrostatic Eve Presents Gleaned Information Lore Panel. I am your host, Ashtarothi, and I am joined by Fyridian and Lockfox, as always. And today we have assembled some of the greatest minds in EVE Online lore. And before we get into that, I want to explain, we do have a slightly smaller panel than we have before. It simply is a result of the fact that we do have a lot of really knowledgeable contributors, and if we waited until everyone was available, you guys would have significantly fewer lore panels. So for the sake of getting more stuff out there for you guys, we assembled a quorum and we're rolling with what we got. We are missing a few people tonight, but the people that are not here have provided us their information, and we're just going to go with that, so that way you guys can get more content. But that being said, Fyridian, why don't you introduce us to who we have?
We have 6 panelists tonight. We've got Adra Lafisk, and if it has to do with the way that people live on a day-to-day basis in New Eden, baseliner and capsuleer alike, today or in the past, that's what is most likely to catch Adra's attention. He's also the moderator of the Federation Out of Character channel. We have Anslow, who is the CEO of Scopeworks. He's an ancient race lore enthusiast, and he created the new lore/RP channels called GR109, R109, and the Router 109 forums at galacticnetwork.net/109. We have Makoto Priano, the CEO of Itsukame Zainu Hyperspatial Inquiries, longtime member of the role-playing community, Anti-Kithra element researcher, and Tweetfleet Slack lore channel regular. Also, I'm supposed to say that Ikame is recruiting. We have Morwin Lagan, a lore generalist, Eric Jalan archivist, and organizer of some past Salen conferences. He's also a moderator for a number of venues for EVE Online's RP community, including the Backstage Out of Character forums at backstage.eve-inspiracy.com. We have Ravis, who writes lore, tinfoil hattery, and EVE fiction at interstellarprivateer.wordpress.com, and he's a pilot with Wormhole Alliance Sleeper Social Club. And finally, we have Uriel Antiavnuechi. He's an avid fan of Eve's lore and backstory, especially the Jove and related subjects, and he serves as archivist and emergent event analyst at Jovian Labs, which can be found at jovianlabs.co.uk. And before we move on, we've got a couple of housekeeping notes. We want to do a quick shout out to Saftsus, who is working on a comprehensive timeline of the Eve lore, and that can be found at criminalcountdown.blogspot.com. You're going to be watching Locke on the Singularity test server, checking out the Jackdaw, and hopefully he'll find some unidentified wormholes to be thematic with what we're talking about. And as a result of that, some spoilers from Singularity will undoubtedly be included. And we would like it if you would check out our previous episode on Pi Inc., which came out a couple weeks ago. And we're going to be having a new episode recorded tomorrow with Minxie and the folks over at Signal Cartel. So look for that to happen. Back to you, Ash.
Thanks so much, Phi. And excellent job with the pronunciations. There's a reason why you do most of the introductions and name talking, because I couldn't do it.
I needed a pronunciation guide for Uriel.
Well, you still did better than anything I could possibly do. So before we go into the big topic, I kind of want to address a lot of little things so that way they don't kind of fall into the wayside. And then once we're done with that, then we can, of course, address the 15,000-pound elephant and, the name of the entire lore panel. So beforehand, I did put out a post on Tweet Fleet, the Twitter, and I said, does anybody have any questions for the lore panel? I got two questions that have kind of been asked a lot, so I'm just going to throw these both out there and see what you guys have to say. The first question is, do we yet know why the system is named Thera? There's a lot of speculation of that back in the day, but do we have any kind of insight into that now? And more importantly, or possibly more importantly, do we know who actually named it that? Who has given it that name?
I don't think we have anything concrete. We still have all of our theories, some of which involve, old Atlantis theories, stuff with the Minoans. As far as who named it, it's safe to assume that the Sisters or Sanctuary did, because they're the ones who settled it. So theoretically, they probably get naming rights.
That's actually
my best answer from what we've covered so far, because I don't think anything new has come up for that yet.
Yeah, there hasn't been anything specific as far as I'm aware. On the other hand, I guess I would more lean toward that it's the Jovian name for the system. Now, why we would know that, I don't know. But from a linguistic perspective, it's actually more fitting with some of the things that you would see there from some of the stuff that we're already uncovering as we go further into the Drifter lore. But again, that's just speculation.
I guess at the end of the day, if there isn't a consensus with what I'm about to say, is that for the most part, we don't know. There's nothing exactly solid. I mean, there's miles upon miles of really good theories that have a lot of evidence backing them, but we don't have anything solid to say that this is why this is the way it is.
Right. Although it is definitely true that it does match more of the Drifter / Jovian naming convention more than Sisters of Eve naming convention.
And if I can just add a little note on that, the biggest link we have right now with that is the Minoan eruption, which basically it destroyed the island of Thera a long time ago, and it was a lot of stuff to do with Crete and a lot of that Greek history, which links back to all the Greek myth being used right now with the Drifters a lot. And also fun to note, actually know something else I can say in a little while. Actually, sorry.
Well, yeah. All right then. So moving on to our second question. Oh, and if you want to know anything else about kind of Thera and all that sort of stuff, I think that we addressed most of that stuff in our first lore panel. I know that we've gone over a lot of this stuff in the past, and at this point, we've now collected over 8 hours by the time we're done with this show of lore goodness. So a lot of that stuff is kind of locked in that stuff. So we have definitely dived into the concept of Thera before. Actually, that reminds me, before I go any further, I will say that due to constraints, we're going to definitely kind of lock this down at 2 hours. So if we have to wrap things up and kind of be more aggressive about our time as we get towards the end, sorry about that. We're definitely going to be doing more of these. So we're just going to try to get in as much as we can. So with that being in mind, let's go on to the next question, which is, now we understand that Concord cannot technically go after the Drifters due to in-game mechanical reasons, but do we have any good lore reasons why Concord is not acting against the Drifters? Because it seems to be that even in the information that we're getting from the DED, they seem to be very passive about their response to the drifters at best. Does anybody have any good information about why that might be?
We've only had one recorded incident that I know of that was in a news item a while back that I think we covered in a previous lore panel, where they engaged something that wasn't capsuleers. As far as I know, there's just one incident, and it was a small RSS fleet, maybe, I think, somewhere in the Republic that the drifters engaged, presumably after they felt there was a threat. Aside from that, the only people that the drifters have done anything explicitly aggressive to has been independent capsuleers. So Concord may be going, well, they ain't doing anything to the people who were supposedly supposed to be protecting from the capsuleers, so there's really nothing we need to do. Or however they're looking at it, it may just be that they're only a threat to us and not to everybody else so far.
Yeah, the Charter of Concord really isn't to be the military force that beats back anything that attacks the empires. At least I really think of them more as the referees of the four-way discussion, or five-way if you want to look at that from, if you include the Jove in that.
And it's important that you include the Jove, as the Jove Directorate is in fact a Concord signatory. So if you think of the dead as being not completely sure that the drifters aren't Jove, then they really can't intervene much. And there is actually precedent for this in that the dead didn't intervene in Colali when the Republic and the Federation fought, and they also sort of went, oh, hands off, not doing, when the Caldari destroyed a dead battleship in the prelude to Caldari Prime.
Right. So basically, the two biggest theories is that the drifters haven't done anything that really warrants a Concord-based response quite yet, or they still do not have sufficient evidence to basically prove that they are not in fact Jovian, which would make them part of who they work for as opposed to who they fight. Do you think that that's a fair way of putting it?
Sounds good to me.
Yep.
All right. Well then, thank you for your questions, and of course, always ask us any questions that you want at either our Twitter at Hydrostatic Eve or to hydrostaticeve@gmail.com, and we'll either get them into the next lore panel or just throw them into our mailbag segments for our Hydrostatic podcast. Moving on to our small topic, there have been a couple of miscellaneous things that got brought up via the tickers on these new scope videos that have been coming out, which the scope videos have been coming out pretty much regularly, either on Thursday or Friday on a weekly basis. And we work pretty hard to try to analyze what's going on the tickers, and I've noticed certain themes that have been kind of coming out of the tickers that are not necessarily related to player-based stuff. My assumption is that the player-based interactions or tickers are kind of just a nod to the player-based actions and not necessarily an advancement of the lore, although who knows, we could always end up being wrong. But there's three basic things that have been kind of coming out. So first of all, what sort of information have we been getting out of this for that we think is leading into Valkyrie? Do we have any kind of the hints of the Valkyrie storyline coming out of the ticker yet?
There was a mention, I think, in the most recent one about some number of Furbolg fighters going missing in Surthold.
I think it was 35.
Was it 35? Yeah, it was however many there was in some system, some Gleaned system that is impossible to pronounce like the rest of them.
Right. And it's really important to note, a lot of people don't really realize this, but fighters like Furbolgs are not like drones. They are actually manned craft. And so they're kind of the precursor to the Valkyrie dogfighting ships, right?
Furbolgs are piloted. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Same. All fighters and fighter bombers are piloted. They have little pilot models in them, and the reason that they're considered drones is just for game mechanics reasons. In terms of control, the reason they cease working when you lose the commanding ship is that they're no longer getting telemetry. So,
right.
Yeah, they're definitely manned.
Oh yeah. So it's definitely noteworthy that happens. Now, there's also been a couple of talk of the Guristas here and there. As we know, the Guristas are definitely interested, or basically the people that have been targeted to be the pirate faction to kind of develop the Valkyrie thing. And I think that there's been tickers before about Guristas doing stuff out in the fringe. But they're definitely kind of staying in the background right now. Now, it is worth noting on an outside note that we are getting a lot closer to a release date for the Oculus Rift, i.e., I believe it was first quarter of next year, and Valkyrie was supposed to be a big launch title for Rift. So I'm pretty sure we're going to start seeing more and more of that come through from this. Now, whether or not it's going to relate to the Drifter stuff or anything like that, still unknown. Okay, so the next thing that's been coming up is a bunch of stuff about the sports in Eve. Now, my first suspicion was when it came out, it was kind of like a tie to there's a real life boxing event that was pretty big in the United States in particular that occurred, and then this report that was very similar or whatever within New Eden on the ticker came out about Mind Clash, and but then Mind Clash came up again in the latest video, kind of a continuation of that same arc. Now, this is interesting because it seems to be completely fluff. It doesn't seem to have anything to do with us. And it's probably just a way to kind of make the world more immersive. But that in and of itself, in my opinion, makes it noteworthy. So does anybody here, can anybody tell us about what Mind Clash is or why it's relevant or, anything? This is something that I'm sure a lot of people have never heard of before. Go for it, Adre.
Mind Clash comes up, I think, most notably as part of Aura's backstory. One of the tickers really recently talked about an Entaki that is retiring, and she's been the Clash champion for years at this point. What Mind Clash is it's and one of the reasons that Entaki are supposedly so good at it is that it's a game you play with your mind. So you connect to a computer, and the computer projects images basically from your mind. And like, for example, Jolin Donalakis's main attack per se is the blue tiger illusion, right? And that goes basically exactly how you'd think, sort of like a Yu-Gi-Oh kind of thing, where you have these moves and they get projected, and that's a part of the entertainment value for people to be playing this. It's so ubiquitous that there's even like little smaller versions of it in bars and stuff like that. Like, everyone knows what this thing is. Is there something specific that you guys want to know?
It's sort of a half shout out to like customizable card games and a half shout out to like esports in the universe lore, right?
Yeah, exactly.
It's basically a really great game for capsuleers when you think about it. I mean, in other regards, just because that's what it is. It is literally a game where you basically try to screw over your opponent by using your head.
Yeah, so drugs were a big problem in the early days for tournaments and stuff like that, until they started banning the crap out of that. But of course, there's always underground rings and stuff like that totally use that stuff.
So in the news, though, they've been talking about kind of this big championship and all that stuff. Is that anything that's tied to anything previously, or is that like a brand new thread?
I remember there being an article a while ago about Jolin winning the last one, I think. As it stands, not really. It ties to a couple of the chronicles. But what, I don't know, if we're going to go into speculation a little bit, I think it has something to do with the entosis links. But I have no idea how yet.
Very interesting. So, and Phi, you've said that one of the things that you've targeted for a soon-to-be Know Your Lore is where you want to dig more into the Mind Clash stuff, right?
Yeah, if there's enough depth in the Mind Clash lore, I'll definitely do a segment on it.
There's a bunch of chronicles, so it does tie into a whole bunch of them.
Yeah, there's at least 1 or 2 chapters in the Burning Life that deal with it, if I remember correctly. So
cool. And so finally, another little entity that's kind of propped up a lot in the last few weeks in all of the kind of news that's come up is Propel Dynamics. Propel Dynamics kind of came into the scene for 2 different reasons. One was they were a big part of the skin program. So when the Rhea was captured by the Caldari state, the Serpentis? It was the Serpentis Rhea, right? That they were using for the camouflage, which eventually became the skin system. That Rhea was taken to Propel Dynamics, and then Propel Dynamics was subsequently raided, and we all got skin technology. But at the same time, in a ticker on a different week, it was noted that Propel Dynamics had 3 Rheas kind of disappeared or was no longer was lost when they were attacked by Angel Cartel. Do we know much about Propel Dynamics or why they might be interesting? Is this isolated events, or is there? I know I've kind of run around on other podcasts and in other public places and done all kinds of tinfoil, but is there? What do we know about Propel Dynamics as an organization?
Well, we don't know a whole lot about it. I mean, one of the things that we know is that they were the creators of some of the modern warp drive setups. Certainly, some of the earliest ones on the, I believe it's the Caldari side, and their names on stickers, of course, all over all the Sisters of Eve ships. So it's expected that they are the creators of the Sisters of Eve warp drives. Which, if you put your tinfoil hat on, you'll notice the similarities between the wavering signature inside the rings of those ships, and when you compare it to the wavering signature in between the arms of the drifter ships, there's a very similar pattern. But that's about all, at least I'm aware of. I don't know if some of the folks who are a little more into the Empire lore know a little bit more about them.
Yeah, I definitely. One of the things that I noted was basically they were taking the Rheas to Thera, which would be the Sisters of Eve. The original Rhea that was captured was part of the Serpentis, and they were attacked by the Angel Cartel. And what's interesting is when you take all of these names and you look at them, they all are kind of in bed together. Sisters of Eve are related to Serpentis because of the family relations between the leaders, Serpati and the head of the Sisters of Eve. The Angel Cartel is related to Serpentis because they run defense for them as the Guardian Angels. Propel Dynamics is related to Sisters of Eve because they obviously work together on this kind of super cool warp drive technology. And of course, that ties them possibly to the Drifters. So there's a lot of weirdness going on right now. And there's definitely a lot more to pay attention to than just what's in your face, I think.
On the wiki, actually, it says friend Mortar's Legion. So if you want to just wrap everybody up in that,
we'll just bring everybody in there.
We need like what you were talking about before we started this this off topic to maximum tinfoil meter for Slack. We kind of need to have one just going back and forth on the stream when we do these panels. Just it just goes into the overload as soon as we start tinfoiling all these groups together. And massive conspiracy theories.
Oh no! Yeah, when you start throwing those things together, you're now getting into like high levels of conspiracy, and I think I talked about it on the Eve News 24. I went on there and we talked about kind of the Drifters and all that stuff, and they let me lay out my whole tinfoil hattery. So I'm not going to go into it now, but if you're interested, you can always go there. So let's move on to kind of the meat of this whole thing, which is a lot of stuff has been happening, in particular with the entosises, or the entosis link, the Drifters, and the Drifter wormholes. So let's kind of go through this in order. The first thing is that the entosis links have been introduced into Tranquility. However, they do not work in their kind of end function as a sovereignty mechanic. They just kind of exist as a thing to play with. Fozzie hinted at the fact that there would be things that would make them meaningful even now. So of course, the first thing everybody did was start kind of using the entosis to kind of link everything together. Before we go into that, though, we've also kind of learned a little bit more about what the entosis is and how it works. Originally, when we were talking about this last time, we knew that the entosis was related to drifter technology through the Antikythera element, but we didn't really have an explanation as to what the entosis was or why it would do anything. So, Mac, why don't you first kind of briefly explain what we've learned about the entosis link and how it relates to our infomorphs?
So there are a few interesting elements here. In the first place, as we theorized then, and we know now for certain, it definitely requires an Antikythera element to make the link in the first place. So that's a key part of it, and that's some sort of Jovian black box. We don't really know how it works, excepting that it also uses sleeper encryption somehow, and the device uses infomorph psychology to interact with its target. And the general view is that in some way, the capsuleer is projecting his or her mind into the target. And it's also actually interesting that the endpoint and start point animation for the entosis link has an element of the wormhole animation that was added after the Origins trailer, a filamentary structure.
Okay. So basically, what we figured out is that we're somehow projecting our psyche into the machines that we're hacking?
Exactly. And so how exactly this works, what exactly this entails, good question. But the use of the word entosis implies that basically our psyche or a mind state copy is being injected wholly into the target and then proceeds to run amok or suborn the system.
That's why the mind clash thing is really interesting, because that's very similar kind of thing to do with your mind.
I suspect that's actually why CCP is bringing it up, is that the implication there is that it's not that different from Mind Clash.
Yeah, and it's also entirely possible that one of the reasons why we're able to do this with the Jove Observatory but haven't had much success anywhere else at this point is that the Jove Observatory structure is optimized for infomorphs interfacing with it, and we're still figuring out how exactly to interface with other systems.
So that actually brings me back to one of the original videos in the scope, which was when we were first talking about the circadian sleepers and the fact that they're scanning everything, and it was kind of listing a bunch of theories. And one of the kind of joke theories was that the seekers were communicating with capsuleers through their implants. And this discovery kind of makes that a little bit more valid than before.
Possibly. There's still the question of how exactly they would interface with the capsuleer infomorph specifically, though it's entirely possible that they're just sort of learning the system and how exactly capsuleer infomorphs are created and what shape they take effectively.
Yeah, I guess if you, again, want to go back into tinfoil, I guess my guess would... I suppose that my guess would be that they were not necessarily trying to communicate directly, but maybe testing the water, so to speak, which is how they decided that our corpses were worth harvesting.
Indeed, and that actually does tie in with the drifter attacking you live, but that's a thing for later. Uriel?
Yeah, so okay, if we're gonna mention the gleaned information next, and I'll say this after that, but first on the entosis link and those that old scope news about saying it might be communicating with implants. There's an old chronicle actually from Strangelove back in 2002 called The Repairman, which has a very interesting possible link to maybe drifters, because the way it's described, two small ships basically shut down this capsuleer in a battleship. He doesn't know it, and they do something to him. They modify him somehow. They modify his behavior. To quote them, they are the hunter and the healer, which I'll explain it better in a post somewhere. But hunter and healer, the names link directly to Artemis and Apollo, which are the names of the two drifters we see so far. So I can mention that somewhere later. But if you want to go read that chronicle, Repairman, it has some possible links maybe not even links. It might not be related at all, but it seems to have some relevance, so I thought I should bring that up.
It sounds like whoever's writing the lore was at least inspired by that chronicle, if nothing else.
Yeah.
All right. So now we have these entosis links, and we kind of know a little bit more about how they work. And there's actually going to be new functionality coming in very soon that is helping with the stations. But one of the things that we discovered was that when you use the entosis links, we get certain pieces of information when you use them against Jovian observatories, which you mentioned earlier. And these items are called Gleaned information. Ravis, why don't you tell us a little bit about the Gleaned information?
Sure. So there are a significant number of items that get pulled out when you use the entosis link on the Jovian observatories. And what you find is that it brings out these various documents that are objects in the game, and they have a number of disconnected statements or recorded or quoted pieces that all have dates on them, but they seem very disconnected. They don't really tell you what they're about, and they grab chunks of different things from everything from what appear to be chronicles, what appear to be news articles, quotes from, in some cases, some of the videos that CCP has released that are a little more on the in-character side. And there are, I think, 76 of these different items that have been found. And when these were found originally on Sissy, a number of people started cataloging different things, looking different things up, and trying to figure out exactly what they were all about. Long story short, it appears that they've been intercepting communications for a very long time and have been tracking the behaviors of the various empires and some of the various groups within those empires, and some of the pirates who are interacting with them, and in some ways have actually looked at it as a sociological experiment of sorts.
Yeah, there's a lot of comments that seem to be like a scientist or an anthropologist kind of notes about behavior, as opposed to like a political machination or something.
You say they've been observing us for a long time. How long are we talking about?
Well, so the oldest date is, let's see, 23,121, which would be, all right, help me out, guys.
It's around, just around 230 years.
200 years, 250 years, yeah.
230, something like that. It's the something with the Gleaned. I looked it up a while ago.
It's the foundation of the Gleaned Empire, right? Or the Gleaned Federation.
The Federation, yeah.
And that's the first entry.
It's also interesting that they reference at one point that they're going to transmit information to modifier enclaves, which implies that the Jove observatories are being handled by some other group. And it's also interesting that the Jove Directorate has a corporatist view on how it wants to be structured, whereas racial lineage enclaves really references the Second Empire a little bit more.
Right. So this kind of tells us more about who originally owned these observatories. It doesn't seem to be that these are originally related to like the drifters or anything like this. These seem like pure Jove, real Jove Empire type stuff, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Though at the same time,
go
on. One thing that's important to remember is anytime we say Jove, currently we're still saying Jove and referencing Jove Directorate. The Second Empire is a separate entity, and there's a whole lot going on there that we don't necessarily consider to be quite Jove in the modern sense.
That's true. And the last lore panel, we went pretty good into the breakdown of the Jovian kind of power through time, or the Jovian society through time. It's definitely not one organization. It's kind of gone through evolution. And there's a really cool infographic that was made, that we made, and that kind of lays it all out flowchart style.
I just linked that in the Twitch chat.
There you go. So that's cool. So the entosis links are working against the Jove observatories, and it's really interesting that it's not actually seeming to work against most of the drifter stuff, as one might expect. Anslow, you have an interesting theory about why the Antikythera elements are in the drifter stations and why it allows us to interact with them, correct?
What? Not the drifter stations, more the
The observatories. You're right, the observatories.
Oh, right. Yeah, I mean, me and Makoto and Kyber and Nico were actually talking about it because after the drifter autopsy thing, which I guess we'll get to later, we were like, okay, what else can we analyze like really intensely and see what we can figure out? And they're like, hey, there's this Antikythera element. Hey, there's a blueprint with all the stuff that we can put into it that aren't just, like tritanium or whatever. Let's look and see what it does. So we looked into every single little bit that would go into a machine like this, and we just kind of worked backwards. It's like, okay, this powers it, this, transmits it. What are we missing to make this thing work? And basically, it's something that would make the infomorph be able to go between, the ship to the building or, whatever what have you. And I believe the reason that we settled on this, semi settled on this being the case was that normally whenever you have your infomorph transfer from one place to another place, you have to either do it through the pod burning system or you have to do it through, those jump clone systems, which are in stations. And there's no other way to do it. But with the Antikythera elements and the entosis links, it seems like this is a new way to kind of throw your infomorph, so to speak, into the observatories and possibly in the future in Fozzie to structures and things like that. So that got us thinking, okay, then what are these things doing at Jove observatories? Well, like we said before, the Jove observatories were, observing us for over 200 years. So that kind of speaks to the whole Jove and their intel network and just how robust that was. And it's like, everyone's like, God, how are these guys so OP? Well, what better way to kind of, get your information, spy and stuff like that than infomorphs versus placing actual physical people there. So with the observatories and these Antikythera elements could be acting like infomorph routers. So you throw one infomorph from one system to another system, it routes through the observatory and the Antikythera element, goes from that place to another place, taking information, dropping it off, and it just keeps going on. And that's how you have a really, really robust information network. And that's how we kind of figured, okay, maybe that's what AKE is. Because at the end of the day, this thing, even separated from the station, was still self-powered, self-contained, and still doing something. But it wasn't something as simple as like a power core or, what have you. But when you throw it into the whole entosis link situation, well, it sort of all comes together.
Now, it's worth noting that this is not proven fact. This is speculation, but pretty solid speculation.
It's us being nerds. Don't worry, we're really, really horrible nerds.
Confirm.
All right, Uriel, you got something to say before we move on, right?
Yeah, one last note about these things. So initially, before the drifters started taking apart the observatories, we saw them and the Circadian Seekers using what appears to be the equivalent of an entosis link on the observatories. Now, looking what we do with the entosis links, it seems almost to be shown that they weren't collecting Antikythera elements mainly from this, because first of all, they come from their ships in the first place. But I'd almost assume that they'd be collecting information that these observatories already have. Because, if they're anything related to the Jove, you could assume that they'd be able to make anything that they could. If these Antikythera elements are something that's almost universally Jovian, which would almost make sense, it would be reasonable to think that they might be collecting intel from these observatories.
Right. Yeah. So it is very interesting. It's obviously the drifters are not giving information to the observatories, but it's also, it is safe to assume that whatever information we've managed to glean out of the observatories, the drifters now know as well.
Yeah, and they weren't taking apart the observatory. This is just to note, they weren't taking apart the observatories when they were just using entosis. That didn't happen until they started using that orange, looks more like a laser on them.
Right.
So they weren't falling apart till then.
All right, so this gleaned information seems to be at least somewhat valuable, and obviously there's a purpose behind it. Ravis, you have been really instrumental in the collection of in organization of this information, correct?
Yeah, I put together a Google Sheets document that is actually publicly open, and you can link that in the show notes. And what you'll see when you go out to this sheet is everything is organized by. You'll see something that says item number, which is the in-game item object, organized by date, and has all the different text of the gleaned information, along with a link to any article that we've been able to find that shows specifically what that refers to, so that you can get the full context of each of those different snippets. Now, what you'll see is a lot of them are already at sort of a high level of confidence, but there's quite a few that are at a medium or low level of confidence, where we think we might know what it is. But certainly we're looking for something where we can nail it down a little bit better, get it a little more tied directly to a source, whether it be a kill board or a posting on the forums or a chronicle or a news item. And so while we've got quite a bit, we are still looking for some of the information, and anyone is able to leave a comment on it, and I tend to check that every couple of days and dig in and look for different places that we can go add some things, and there's a bunch of different notes that other people have read out or left out there that you can also take a look at.
And oh my god, if you're interested in the Jove spookily watching us part of the lore, this whole spreadsheet is just a loregasm.
Yeah.
It's pretty frightening.
There's a ton of stuff out there, and I personally, from my perspective, there's a couple of things that I find the most fascinating. One of which is that they talk about each group as being a cohort, like Sanchez Nation is a cohort, or the Galente are a model of a society, or the Amar are a model of a society. And so you can tell that they're looking at the individual groups and trying to figure out what makes them tick and why they are or are not a good model for society, which raises a whole bunch of other questions around why they're doing that and why they feel the need to do that if they're so hyper advanced and they're so far down the line and yet so out of touch with their human side. So there's a whole bunch of other questions that brings up, along with there's a whole section in one of the documents. You'll see them in there. I think of them as the anthill statements.
Yeah, those are definitely
those are the comedy ones, really. They just stand out, and you're like, wait, what? Oh my god, that's funny.
Right, and those are the ones that we really don't have good proven links to, are some of those anthill ones. So go take a look and weigh in on some of those things, add some comments, and let us know if you have a link to an old post or an old statement or an old story that we might have missed and can actually provably tie back to.
And just to clarify real quick, the ones that you're referring to is there's a post that says step 1, build a better ant, and then there's a one almost a year later that says step 2, kick over the anthill, and then one that's a year after that says step 3, assess.
Now,
And
have we?
There's
Have
step
we-
4, reiterate, about 2 years later.
oh yeah, you're right. In YC 110.
Yeah, that was the release of Empyrean Age.
That's
So
one of
it's very
Say-
Sorry, go on.
Sorry, I just keep doing that. I just want to say, have we linked those to any dates yet?
The dates are on there.
The
what we
dates are
haven't linked them to is any actual specific stories, because they're so non-specific that in order to tie them together, it's almost like we've got to find all 4 stories or all 4 posts and show that they're somehow connected, and we haven't really managed to do that yet.
All right.
It's also worth noting that the final message is cloaking systems failure, proximity alert, initiate systems shutdown, which tells us a few things. First of all, it tells us that the cloaking system was not something that was done intentionally, or it doesn't seem to be something that was initiated intentionally. It was, in fact, a problem, as it were. And it also kind of suggests that we're not going to get any additional gleaned information out of this stuff over time. One thing that's very eerie is that the message right before that is they couldn't predict this ? So it seems like the observatories were kind of watching us even up to the final moments of the systems failing.
Which I believe is actually on the same one as the step 1, step 2, step 3.
I think you are correct, yeah. So the way it works, for those of you who haven't been kind of trying this out yourself, you can throw an entosis link on your ship and go to the Jovian Observatory, kind of point at it and shoot it, and it'll go off. And at the end of the cycle, there is a chance, or there you will get a gleaned information, which is a text. It looks like a text tablet, and when you look at the information for that item, it gives you, I think, usually about 5 or 6 of these kind of pieces of information with dates, and they're not necessarily connected. They're not necessarily they're in chronological order, but they're not like tied together or anything like that. And so what we've done is woven those dates and times together and kind of put them all in chronological order. And kind of worked from there. So if you want to, you can just go and get your own gleaned information by doing that. And so far, that is the only thing that we have found the entosis links work on that we didn't already know about, like the station changes that are coming out and whatnot. However, that doesn't necessarily mean that is the only thing that the entosis link does work on. Mac, you've been working pretty hard to systematically go through the various stuff that is possible to entosis. You want to talk about that for a second?
Yeah, I can touch on that. So with release of the entosis links, because CCP Fozzie had said that there would be a few things that this would be useful for, there's a hope that we would be able to use the entosis link on various like old strange items in space and that type of thing to achieve a response. Anything from like activating the Children of Light, possibly seeing if we finally had a trigger for the integrated terminus. And by and large, the response has been nada. The entosis link won't even activate. That said, we do have a pretty comprehensive list of what we've tested, everything from like the monolith in a dead end to the violent wormhole in the Promised Land to various shattered wormhole structures. And we do have a few things that still need to be tested. So there will be a link to the entosis testing document, hopefully in the show notes, and I'll be posting it to the Twitch channel now. So if you've got a chance to try out a link on anything, please do. It'd be very much appreciated.
Yep. At this point, it's funny because one of the very first questions that we ever got asked for in the lore panel was how to get involved in the lore as it's unfolding, and now it has become very clear how you can contribute. Both of these documents require some muscle and some brain work in order to make things work, and there's more of this kind of stuff coming out all the time. So if you are interested in contributing to kind of helping us decipher all of this stuff, those are definitely a good place to start.
And I wouldn't give up on the ones that have failed so far, because we don't know if CCP is going to add stuff at some point. So it's always possible that something might become entosisable at some juncture.
Yeah, every patch, those results basically get invalidated.
In theory.
Theoretically.
Dang you, CCP. All right. Is there anything else that we want to kind of go over before we move on from entosis and gleaned information?
I think the only thing that Robus didn't touch on with the spreadsheet is one of the other things we're trying to do is we're trying to look through all the information and see what of this stuff is something that we could piece together in character. We have an extra column on the spreadsheet that he's gone through, and some people have double checked, where it's a question of, is this something that is knowable to our characters? So if you, when you're looking for news or posts that refer to things, that would be something to keep an eye out for if you have your mind in working in that kind of way.
And you're talking about the gleaning one, not the entosis
Gleaning.
link one. So
no,
there's
the
one
entosis links that's definitely in character, whether that works or not, because you're doing it in game. But yeah, for like the Gleaned information spreadsheet. Just like that's one thing we've been looking at as to whether things are known in or out of character.
Right. So as an example, there's one of the early ones is a recording of something that happened in the chronicle called Theodicy, and it's right there in Theodicy, so it's pretty easy to track down that that's what it is. On the other hand, none of the characters in New Eden, other than a couple of NPCs hidden away somewhere, know what actually happened that day. So the likelihood is your character's not going to know a thing about it, and so it would, while it's not a mystery to us as players, it is a mystery to all the characters in the game.
But this is definitely going to give them a reason to start questioning things.
Oh, yes.
All right.
Although there are some other ones that we found were weird, that like we have no idea how to really interpret it, because I think there was the one I found about standings getting reset.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas, like, so fragile these minds, so fleeting their crimes, and it's a reference to some news article, as best we can tell, where there was some bug with the standing system, and CCP went, "Yeah, we're just wiping everybody's standings." So it's like there wasn't really any explanation for it. They basically just said all agents and corporations have basically lost their memory and have no idea who the hell you are. Your standings are all reset. So
some of them may be almost sort of tongue-in-cheek references from CCP to the players, even more so than meant as in-character information, and that's a great example of one.
Yeah.
All right, and as a final note, with the things that people are trying to entosis, does the entosis even turn on with any of the other mechanisms, or is it simply like it just doesn't work on anything besides the Jovian outpost so far?
No, it gives you a little notification that says that, like, something along the lines of you can't activate the entosis link on this module or on this object or whatever.
Okay.
Yeah. Which actually means it's fairly safe to test on something you don't think it'll activate on. Whereas when you're entosising a Jove observatory, you're pinned in place in a location where seekers and drifters are likely to show up and get very aggravated that you're on grid with them.
That's important to note. Okay, cool. So I think we can now move on to our next topic, which is there's been some recent drifter news. First of all, at the top of that, our very own Anslo did some stuff with the drifter autopsy. Unfortunately, I think he had to step out for a minute. So we will kind of just talk about that a little bit. There was an autopsy release that was done. Wait, actually, Mac, were you involved in that as well?
No, that was Anslo, Mazir, Kybernetis Moros, and there's one I'm forgetting. Thank you.
That's unfortunate. Maybe we'll circle back on that and see whether or not Anslo can get back in time to talk about that. But one thing that was really important about that was that the report that came out was interrupted by a drifter attack in Uli. Now, this does represent what I believe to be the very first live event, really, that is that really was like a pointed event involved in the drifter kind of storyline. Is that correct? Was there any other like really centralized live event prior to this?
This one was a pretty low-key live event in that they had the news article and the scope video, and then they basically spawned 4 drifters at the Uli station in question, and folks, shot at them.
People showed up. They shot the drifters after a while. Aside from that, there were 1 or 2 ISDs present, and they did have an event actor in the system, Lena Amber, who you have seen and heard on, I would probably say about half the scope videos. She was also present and local at the time and talking a little bit. I may have gotten there after she did a bunch of the talking, but she did speak for a while I was there. So
yeah, I do remember. I'm pretty sure that was the actor that basically said that the broadcast has been interrupted and that the broadcast has been canceled, which was the last message I remember being, talked to by them. I know another ISD was there, but he was there as a reporter, basically. So, So that is actually an interesting note. There are different ISD teams, so not all ISD are created equal. One of the things that I think that we should go into at some other point in the future, probably on a podcast episode, I want to get kind of an ISD guy on to kind of explain how all that stuff works, because it's not really well known. But the biggest thing is that just realize that just because you see an ISD doesn't necessarily mean that they're an event actor. And just because you see an event actor doesn't mean that they're ISD. Like, some of the ISD are related to kind of the stuff that's going on and more in the know than others, but they have different roles.
I think a better way to put it is that the ISD are actually separate from the events team. They do have a news team that goes around trying to find things that are going on with players and make that news. Those are the interstellar correspondents. But they don't actually currently have a ISD volunteer events team. They used to a long time ago. It was called Aurora. There has been talk. It was brought up at FanFest that CCP Affinity is looking to put together a new team, but she said, there's more work to be done before they can really release details about it. Other than this is something we're looking to bring back. Keep your eyes peeled. The event actors are all full CCP employees. ISD are all volunteers. It's a very big distinction that needs to be made.
Right. Okay. So yeah, and the event actor wasn't actually ISD because it was the scope member, not ISD.
It was almost certainly CCP Falcon.
Sure. Okay. So we might circle back to that in a little bit when Anselo gets back. But in the meantime, another thing that happened was that also related to the scope was we received a broadcast from the old Highland Tukos, who is a character that we talked about, I believe, in the first lore panel. This guy is a big name. Who wants to talk about just very briefly who this guy is and why it's so important that he even showed up in a broadcast, let alone what that broadcast meant for us?
This is normally where Ravis, Mark, and I would all look at each other and start giggling.
I'm gonna throw you the ball here on this one. Why don't you run with it?
Okay. Highland Tukos was a Xinu employee who, a number of years ago, defected to the Republic, citing he didn't care for the way that they handled what he called applied science. When he defected with a bunch of people and a freighter to the Republic, he ended up setting up shop with Efer and Company, who are a small Minmatar biotech firm. The result of that was I think it was about a year long, or maybe it was almost a year's worth of live event arcs where basically the players became very hands-on involved with developing the lore and bringing more obscure pieces of the storyline into the public eye where they could be interacted with. So it was basically a research cooperative, and it was called Erectulon. We definitely talked about it during the Ray lore panel. But sometime after Site 1 was created, which was it's a beacon that's easy to get to in Aram. You can just warp to it and wander around inside and pick up little research pamphlets that represent projects that people worked on. Sometime after that was released, CCP Dropbear, who was responsible for that particular arc and the event actors behind it, there was some internal politics involving people being shuffled around and things like that, and CCP kind of dropped the live events for a while. And during that time, obviously, there was no more contact with Tukos, and we kind of never really found out what happened with him in the intervening years until, well, just recently we've had, over in the last 6-7 months, there's been, forum posts from someone who supposedly is him, but might be somebody impersonating him. And now we have this news item that we showed off at the very beginning of the panel today.
Not to sound too ominous, but it could be someone or something impersonating him.
Yeah, for all we know, it could be Drifter.
The messages that we've received are less than normal. Uriel, you have something to throw out there about that, right?
Yeah, on the Intergalactic Summit forum posts, we have 4 total posts from Tukos in the last little while. The first 2 are significantly different from the second 2. The first one's their speech pattern is nothing like his, and they're full of hexadecimal and little bits of code that translate to little bits of saying like syntax error or things like that. The first one requests that we donate the old Jovian body parts, which were Misubanya from an event in 2004, to a place that is going to be set up in Site 1. And then the second message is saying that it's been established and that's online. And the code, the little bits of code in one of them, actually, he mentioned, which doesn't really appear to be Tukos at this point, mentions that we've colonized certain wormhole systems. And at the time of this, we had not yet reached Thera as us, but he mentions the system ID for Thera, which means, obviously, that whoever's behind us knew about the Sisters of Eve and Thera before we did. And moving on to the next 2 of his posts, they are broken up communications. Like we barely are able to understand it. But from what we can understand, the first communications were from someone who wasn't him, and that he had been captured by something. And the word biomechanical seems to come up in there at least once. He mentions something about what we can find as sleeper vessel, something that from what we've been able to translate, he'll be returning in a sleeper vessel, possibly, and mentions, that's about it, saying don't shoot any sleeper entering Site 1, and that's about it for now.
Has anyone actually gone back now? And I know Morwin and I think Makoto, you were both involved in some of the original translations back in November, October, November. Have you guys gone back and re-reviewed them, knowing what we know now?
No, but if Makoto wants to sit down with me and do that tomorrow, I have like nothing to do, so.
Hey, yeah, let's have another look. I'm not sure we're going to get too much further than we did originally, seeing as...
Because back then we didn't know about the Drifters, Caroline Starr hadn't happened.
I think, but I think it's, in this case, it might be easier for us to look at it out of character than in character, because in character I think we're still going to be missing some details.
Sure.
Okay, but there is a really interesting thing, which is we've gotten a couple of facts in the last week, really, that really changes our understanding of at least those last few broadcasts. I don't know if it answers any questions or just raises more questions, but it definitely ties into that, which is that we had the Highland Tukos broadcast, which was shown at the top of the video, which was a big deal and caused the Scope members to get arrested, and there's a hubbub about that. And one of the interesting notes about that is the broadcast has been dated to at least 6 months to a year ago, which means that this broadcast that we received occurred prior to any of these broadcasts that we're talking about right now with the hexadecimal and all that stuff. So, one of the things that's really important to note from that Highland Tukos broadcast, it isn't mentioned in the Highland Tukos broadcast, but it's strongly suggested that Highland, it was attacked. You can hear his klaxons from the shield and armor getting low. And the last frame that you see of him, he's decloaked, which is, as anybody who's used, Covop's ships knows, that's a really bad thing to be. He's cloaked at the beginning, but then he's later on decloaked, and that's when you hear the klaxons, and it's the end of the broadcast. So the suspicion is that Tukos' ship got waxed by the drifters. And in fact, the DED has moved his status to presumed dead, which is interesting because it was of my understanding that Highland Tukos is in fact a capsuleer. Is that correct?
Yes, he is a capsuleer.
But
Well, yeah, but he's also he's an event actor. Well, I do want to
Well, he's
clarify
also
one
way
thing.
persona non grata right now, and I suspect most of his clones have been destroyed.
Only with Ishikone and Zainu.
Yeah, I would say only in the
Ifra has not
Caldari
said
state.
anything of the sort. So
That's true.
if he was a smart man, he moved all of his such things to the Republic. But I did want to make one point: is that 6 months ago was December. And the news item that was recently released said at least 6 months ago, which means it's entirely possible that that recording happened in the middle of the news posts or the IGS forum posts. We don't actually know for sure where it happened in between. All we know is it happened at least 6 months ago and possibly up to a year ago.
Now, one of the other interesting things that I noted from the DED records from that whole thing was that and correct me if I'm wrong, he routed his information through Site 1 in order to get the information to presumably wherever it was, presumably Effer and Co., right? Like he sent that message to originally?
Yeah, and
I think that was the
Co.
implication, yeah.
Actually, at the time of the post, denied ever having actually received a communication from Helen Tukos, which also matches up with the issue of Effer and Co. not actually telling the dead about it until May 8th, I believe.
May not have told the DED about it.
There's also, if I could recall correctly, a reference to that RM router in one of the original communications.
Yes, I will find.
Very cool. So, but it's also worth noting, so our fluid router works pretty well even in wormhole space, obviously. We can still, if we die and are potted in wormholes, we transmit back to our clone just fine. But at the same time, if we send a message to somebody, like if I'm just sending a broadcast to somebody else in Eve, that also works just fine. So it seems to be that the fluid router does work. There's no local beacon, so that's why we don't have local in wormhole space. But communication from wormhole space out of wormhole space doesn't seem to have a problem. But the message that's sent from Highland Tukos is very, very disrupted. And this, yep.
Well, the point was raised specifically regarding the clone stuff. It's entirely possible that he isn't dead. What may have happened is they just may have destroyed his ship and then yoinked his capsule. The only weirdness about that is the capsule's fairly tamper-proof in terms of getting to the interior. It's very, very touchy, and there's like a very, very small variance in the internal pressure where if it goes too far up or down, it just kills the occupant instantly and transmits. So I would say that the only way for him not to have been brought back in a cloning vat in known space is for him not to be dead. They may have gotten him out of the capsule, at which point he's screwed.
If you want some really interesting tinfoil, they haven't told anyone what Effer employee they have under lock and key right now.
That's also true. We do not know the identity of the Effer employee. It's entirely possible that that's Tukos.
It is interesting to note that Tukos said that, as you pointed out, that he would be returning possibly in a sleeper vessel, and there's also a bunch of code and machine garble in the information that's being sent. So, and this kind of goes back to what we've talked about with the infomorph, right? So it's possible that he could technically exist outside of a body if he was captured by the drifter technology, correct?
Oh yeah, well, and that's an interesting link to Xino lore. Actually, Xino is known for, among other things, the fact that its CEO is one of the first people outside of the sleeper civilization to become an upload person. He Toto Kirkanen, I think is his, or is it Kirikanen or something like that. Makoto may know the actual pronunciation. The old CEO of Xino basically uploaded his mind into a computer. So there's just an interesting hook there in that regard. As far as the communication stuff goes, yeah, it's garbled, which is a little weird when you consider how our communication works. But what we know of how the drifters attacked the communication broadcast in UI, it's not that out of the ordinary, because the way the fluid router networks work is that they're basically a bunch of quantum entangled networks or nodes on a network. But to get to those routers, you're going to be using mediums that are not lossless. So it's entirely possible that the interference is between whatever he's using and the fluid router. Somewhere.
Well, except for in the report from the ULI event, I actually thought that too. And then I read the report from the ULI event, and they specifically said that they took down the fluid routers in several systems, that they just bombarded it with something and caused the fluid routers to literally go offline.
I can bring that up, but I'm pretty sure it wasn't the fluid routers. It was other parts of the communications network. The fluid routers were stated to be okay, if I remember right.
Though the implication is still that they disrupted communications along some channels in a constellation-wide area, which really leads into the lore of our future ability to use entosis links for FuzzySoft.
And I don't think either of you are wrong. I think the initial report was that several fluid routers went down, but then later on that report was rescinded.
Oh, is that what happened? Okay, there you go.
If I remember, it said they went down, but were quickly put back up. That's what I remember the article saying. At least I'll link it for you guys later.
Yeah, no, they said that it came back up quickly. I'm trying to look it up right now, but it might not work out. So in the meantime, though, let's actually use that as a segue to kind of circle back to Anslo and the Drifter autopsy release. Anslo, you back, right?
No.
All right, so this was something that you put together, which was an analysis of kind of the Drifter physiology, correct? So why don't you tell us a little bit about how you put that together and kind of what sort of revelations you pulled from it, and then what revelations from that CCP decided to kind of highlight as definitely canon.
That's a lot of questions.
I know.
Well, first I'm just gonna say that it wasn't my project alone. Like, I just was a nerd who came up with a horrible idea, and then people helped me make it not horrible. So, like, a lot of credit again goes to Mizir Star Surge, to Kybernetis Moros, to Calo Askold. Shoot, I know I'm forgetting something. No, that was it. Leonie Kyber or Calo Kyber and Miz. Yeah. So I kind of all asked them for help on trying to expand the report and saying like, hey, I don't know that much stuff in terms of physiology. Could you guys help me put this together? So we all came together, did a thing, and we managed to put together the first report, which was basically an analysis of the different lobes of the Drifter. So what started this all was basically me being really, really annoyed that of all these clues and things like that with the drifters that were popping up, we couldn't really solve anything. There was nothing like solid to go off of, and I was like kind of grasping at straws, thinking like, is there anything that we can do instead of just tinfoiling 24/7? It's like, don't get me wrong, I like tinfoiling, but it was getting to ridiculous levels. So I kind of looked at the head of the drifter and I was like, well, hey, these are kind of nifty spots to put implants, and then apparently those implants we were told weren't like they weren't there for no reason. So CCP I basically said that going forward with their storyline, they weren't going to put things where they were just because they looked cool. So the implants aren't there because they looked cool. The drifter battleships aren't made in a certain way because they look cool. It's all for a very specific reason, whatever storyline, scientific, something like that. So on that note, I was like, okay, well, I work at a specific government agency that's not going to be named because someone watching the stream might work there too. But with that agency, we have a very special couple of apps, and those apps, one of them is a way that you can kind of superimpose like a patient's scan onto certain body parts so that you can do comparisons for clinical trials, whatever have you. So we did that, but with a drifter. So I basically took a drifter head and superimposed it onto a standard human brain, and we were trying to figure out, okay, what part of this drifter brain corresponds with what human brain part, and what does it do? And then we did that. We wrote up that report, and then we published it on IGS and a couple other places. Well, CCP decided, hey, this is kind of cool. Can you do this for the rest of the body? To which I was like, maybe. And then I went to Miz, and I went to Kyber, and I went to Cal, and they're like, maybe. Because making like doing an analysis of the brain was a bit easier because we could see everything, we could make direct correspondence. But for this next thing, they wanted a full autopsy report with like the digestive system, the nervous system, everything far in between. So I really had to lean on Miz and Kyber and Callow for this one, because that was really like between real work and working on scope work stuff and everything else. I couldn't do it all by myself. So really it was thanks to them that we were able to put together the final product and then submit that to CCP, and then they rolled with it. And actually you can get a much better outline of exactly how that happened on Mizir's Crossing Zebra article, which very, very clearly shows, step by step everything that happened and what led to what.
So details like the voice box, was that, how did you come to that conclusion? Was that provided by CCP? Did they assist in any of that, or?
I mean, they wanted us to have a lot of creative liberty, but they had some storyline stuff planned, and that was really the only stipulation aside from the drifters aren't Jove. ... Uriel. I'm just kidding. But no, the thing with the drifters was that they were supposed to be kind of similar to the Jove, but not entirely. But the entire point of that was to give wiggle room. So they could either go one way and say, okay, we're actually going to make them Jove, or they could go another way, and they had all this, leeway to basically play with the storyline. But the lack of vocal cords, that was one big, hard line. This has to be the way it is. And we weren't told why. We don't fully know why. That was the only stipulation that they gave us. So, and then aside from that, we had all the creative liberty in the world.
Very cool. So the facts that they point out for the scope video are kind of the hardline facts that you were just given to you, and then the rest of the report was based on your kind of knowledge of biology.
Not really.
Or your team's knowledge.
There was also the nanite infused blood.
Yeah, what about the nanites?
Well, it wasn't really nanite infused blood. So basically what was going on was we were saying that during the reanimation process, the corpses that they used had to be engineered in a completely different way, and they had to be given a very specific exosuit so that they could function properly. And you guys saw that like kind of towards the end of the video. Now, we wanted to kind of mix that with Antikythera really badly, because we kind of wanted to force CCP's hand and be like, hey, so maybe it does this, huh, right, like this, maybe, but we were just saying maybe Antikythera was being harvested as a means to help animate the people that they needed to animate. So they could have it's a really weird way to describe it, but if I were to make an illustration, let's say that you had a closed loop system that had a certain amount of water in it, and then that certain amount of water just went through the entire system, and it went through very specific machines in that loop, and those machines were powered somehow by that water. By that water going through it, it just kept going and going and going. It's like a perpetual motion device, if you will. Take that illustration and apply it to the drifters, but instead of water, you're using some kind of energy to jumpstart the drifter, to jumpstart the body. So you use this whatever energy that's, inside of an Antikythera element, and it just kind of, bursts into the body, and then the body itself, between the implants, the actual body proper, and the exoskeleton or the exosuit, what have you, all those are able to kind of keep the cycle going and going and going to keep the drifter alive. It's kind of like the Energizer Bunny almost. But because of that, we were like, okay, let's say that the blood in the drifter was kind of affected by that, and they switched out different things like white blood cells and all that other good stuff, and then that radiation was able to kind of, well, it's not actual radiation, we just use that because we don't have another word for it, but that radiation or energy or what have you was able to kind of adapt those blood cells to whatever they would need to clean this thing or clean that thing or deal with one thing or another. It was just an end-all be-all super powerful, energy inside of them. But with the onset of the Antikythera elements that we were talking about before, I mean, maybe they'll still be something that they used for their bodies, maybe not, I don't know, but, it's all, like I said before, it was all creative leeway, it was all up in the air, so really, it could go one way or the other. Anything's possible at this point now.
On tinfoil thought on that note, we already know that you use the Antikythera elements to make entosis links. Maybe that's what they're using to get the minds into the bodies they're building.
Well, we thought about that too, yeah, after the fact, whenever we saw what entosis was. I mean, this was in the back of my mind, but it's like when you take that, and then when you think about the Emergent Threats trailer, that's totally a possibility, but then I start going down that road, and then it's like falling down a rabbit hole, and then, oh god, help me.
Well,
so it's just like most things CCP does, right?
It's worth noting that we kind of had this idea that the drifters were building an army with these bodies, but from the Highland 2-Cost video seems to imply that they already have a pretty sizable army before they ever even began harvesting corpses from capsuleers or taking Antikythera from Jove Observatory. So it's kind of interesting. They may be ramping up their production, which is even more terrifying. But I'm actually going to use that to segue into the final big piece, just so that we can make sure to give this plenty of time. So about a week ago, a new build on Sissy came out, and it was almost immediately noted that the wormholes are transversible now. And this actually happened prior to the Highland 2-Cost video coming out. We sent in several groups of people, and we located some unique structures that have basically never been seen before. And we'll go into that in a little bit of detail. But one of the things that was very interesting was on day one of our exploration, we found all of the sites that we went to unoccupied. Since then, on day 2, when we went in, we found them fully occupied by just hundreds of drifters. And at the time, I remember in Lore Channel, we suspected that was just CCP kind of cock blocking us to make sure that we couldn't get any deeper. And then the next day, the Highland 2-Cost video came out to confirm, no, in fact, that is actually what that is. And that those drifters, that quantity of drifter is in fact the correct, the correct kind of response that we should expect in that kind of area. So all that being said, why don't we talk a little bit about these new unidentified wormholes and what we've gotten out of them. They've kind of played a lot of cat and mouse games with us when it comes to their operation, right? Anyone?
Do you, Uriel, do you want to take the first shot at it since you guys took an early run?
Yeah, totally. So the first day, me and General Stargazer and a couple of other people, we all fit up a group and went into one of the unidentified wormholes. The first one we went into was, I think, first of all,
we went to the Vedette first. I know that.
Yeah, Vedette. Okay, yeah. So we went to Vedette first. Just to mention, there are 5 specific wormholes, each with a very differently named site. Each of them, except for one, has a name pertaining to a fortification of some sort of castle or anything. All of them are French, and so it's Vedette, Barbican, Sentinel. Let's see, what was the Redoubt, yeah,
and Conflux.
Conflux, yes, which is the only one that has a different name. And Conflux, the literal meaning is usually used to mean where two rivers or something like that meets, but we don't really know the significance of that for now. But anyhow, back to the thing itself. The sites themselves are a lot more complex than any other sites we've had yet. More complex than the, well, in a way, more complex than the new sleeper sites. And they have multiple rooms. You go through the first gate, you're in a room with 2 gates. They each lead to a different side of this complex, really. One of them leads to a place with an alpha gate, well, alpha transfer it's called, and the other one leads to one with a beta transfer. Now, each of them also has a gate to another room, which has a hackable can. Now, the thing is, the one on the side with the alpha gate leads to the can that opens the beta gate. So, to get through this thing, even just this first 2 rooms, you have to go on both sides at the same time. So, in other words, you cannot do this alone, regardless of what you do. And there are also sleepers in these rooms, which means you're not going to just be able to fly through this with a Covops or something, because you need to hack these and get through. So sleepers will kind of make that a little more difficult.
It's also worth noting that once they're hacked, they only seem to remain active for a very short period of time. So
yeah, around
it's
2
not
minutes.
like you can dilly-dally.
Right, it's around 2 minutes for that. And once it's through, it'll not... Okay, let's see. From our observations, what was it? At least an hour or something till it opened again, right?
Yeah, I mean, we gave up in the Vedette. We tried to reset it by just doing the normal, like, warp to another signature and everybody stay out for 5 minutes or 10 minutes, and none of that worked. So we ended up abandoning it and going to another wormhole.
Which was Sentinel. And so that's where we started going through the rooms for real, because we figured out what we'd screwed up. So beyond that, there are first I'm going to call them the alpha and the beta rooms. And then there's a gamma and delta also. And then there's a final room, well, the second to last room, where the paths meet again with a bunch of sleepers, and we killed those and take the last gate. And guess what we found? The hive structure. Well, it's called a hive. It's the thing in the Emergent Threats trailer, if you've seen that. The gigantic thing behind the sleeper structure that the Seekers are taking the sleeper bodies from, which are, awesomely, also around broken sleeper enclaves on Sissy that are surrounding the hive structures. And they're called Jove corpses. I have a few pictures on my Twitter. You might be able to find them there. Very cool. And in the middle of the gigantic drifter hive, which is something like 200 kilometers across. If anyone wants to link an image, that'd be nice. There's something called a vault. Now, the thing is, these things seem to be named in accordance with the names of the sites. So there is the one we got to was the Sentinel Hive and the Sentinel Vault. But when we first got in there, remember, this is on the first day, the vault was empty. The only things in the room apart from the structures were a few sleeper drones. And something I actually realized later, killing those sleeper drones gave us a drifter faction standings hit. Not, just nothing like normal sleeper drones do, which was kind of cool to notice. And if we want to talk about something else first, I can go right into what they've turned into now, if you'd like.
I will say that you're being very polite in your description of the conclaves or the enclaves and the Sentinel. It wasn't just that they're around it. It looked
Destroyed
as
them.
if it was smashed into it. Like it either like bridged directly on top of it, or it came in at a high velocity and just destroyed the 2 enclaves.
Yeah,
and
they're
kind of
basically
scattered
broken apart.
Yeah, scattered the pieces. Now, it was also data mined from Sissy that we saw Jove bodies, like 4 or 5 Jove bodies, like corpses, and that caused all kinds of weird theories. But this seems to be the source of that, because you can actually see sleepers, or the sleeper pods from the enclaves broken open and kind of Jovian bodies floating out of it, which of course confirms what we've sort of already knew, which was that sleepers and Jove were ostensibly originally the same people, and so it really seems to kind of point to that in a very clear way, because it's Jovian bodies, and they're even called Jovian corpses attached to a sleeper enclave.
Right. And so would you like me to go ahead and explain the next part and what they've changed to now?
Sure, yeah, go for it.
All right. So, okay, first of all, do you guys have the screenshots that I linked earlier?
I believe people are. If I posted them in the Hydrostatic Eve or into the Twitch chat.
Sweet. Okay. All right. So first off, I'll say what we've found now. I personally slow boated to the middle of one of the sites, the Conflux site, last week, I think, something like that. And in the middle, instead of the massive drifter fleet like we saw in the trailer and what was there at least at one time, there is a singular drifter battleship. However, this is a new drifter. Well, it's not exactly new because it's been in the files for a while, but this is the Hikanta Tyrannos. And it's on its own, guarding what appears now to be a filled vault. The vault has a filled icon, and there's something in it now. I'll get to that in a minute, but also, there was, or is, a second Drifter Battleship entry in the game data called Drifter Battleship 2. Now, originally, and up until what it is on Sissy now, this was just a placeholder with a sleeper drone in it. But with the newest updates to Sissy and with the Hikata Tyrannos, it's changed to a Drifter Battleship. However, I can't see the stats. I think it'd be reasonable to assume that this new Drifter would be at least somewhat, if not significantly more powerful than just Apollo or Artemis, which are flying around HiSec. This thing is guarding the Drifter hives. And what may be inside those hives and the vaults, I'll get to that now. There are new unknown components on Sissy, like the Antikythera element. But these are directly linked, in name at least, to these new sites. There are, let's see, for each site there is an index, meaning like Vidette, Barbican, Redoubt index. And to go along with that, there are what Enzo likes to call radioactive bread. They're called new elements. The Barbican element, Redoubt element, so on and so on. The descriptions of them seem to indicate that the indexes will be used to unlock the vaults, which will more than likely contain the element. Which
the index refers to, the description of the index refers to it as a one-use only passkey.
Yes.
Whereas the element seems to suggest that it is a piece to something else, like it's its own thing.
Something important, yeah. And as it stands, the most reasonable assumption we have so far, or at least some of us, is that the index will be dropped by the Hikanta Tyrannos, which appears to be guarding the vault because it just orbits around it. And I mean, unless it's found somewhere else, which should also totally be possible. But it's worth mentioning that a couple people have found different meanings behind Hikanta in our lore channel, including one that could either mean, well, shield, which was found by Radical Divinity, or what was the other one that we were talking about?
There are a few different ones. Competent is one.
Or like focused, yeah, like one.
Yeah, there was one where they broke the word Hikanta into two. And and then I think competent was one of them.
Yeah, something like that. And I gotta say the one I do like the most though still is Radicals, because well, saying shield and where he found it, it actually, I don't remember the exact things right now, but I can link it somewhere later. It was actually linked to a couple other things that are related to things we've seen so far, including this old story, which has a link to, if I remember correctly, Enheduanni, which was the name that Enheduanni appears to be taken directly from, which would seem like a valid place to make a link.
Hikanta also means beautiful in Malagasy.
Right. Yeah, I have heard that one.
I don't know if I would call that particular drifter beautiful. The female ones have an interesting look to them, but not the male ones. Sorry.
Wow,
it is interesting that it does break the naming convention that we've seen kind of in everything else from the drifters.
Although it's also a final thing worth mentioning with that, the where it comes from. It's I forget the name of the source language, but it's related to ancient Greek. It's like in the continuity through the Greek language, which would make sense in this case for the shield one.
Right, and there are Greek words that do tie back to that. So ikanta with no H is where competent comes from. And there are a couple other ones that people have found that break up a couple of Greek words that tie back into it. So there are some Greek ideas in there as well.
Right.
And it's worth noting that literally we have no idea what any of the elements are for. Like there's
some theories.
There's
and
some
I was actually
theories.
just
Yeah,
about
we
to
have a
say,
couple,
one of the things people are starting to suspect is that maybe these will be part of the structures that we're going to start being able to build, like the citadels, because CCP made a joke in the dev blog, saying that they really wanted to call them chateaus instead of
Another French word.
citadels. But yeah, another French word. And all of I'm not sure about conflux, but I know the other four definitely are based on French names for different fortifications. So there was some tinfoilery over how maybe this was a tongue-in-cheek reference to the source of some of the materials that we need to make them, or maybe it was just CCP and Turbium being a wise ass and just trying to just make fun of everybody else at the company who said no, let's call them citadels.
Which is funny. Also, just to mention a fun little thing about the citadels, well, beyond that link, and them also kind of looking, well, the ones in the devlog look very similar to Jove observatories. But the funniest thing about that, and what I found really awesome, is their mention of a possible doomsday design specifically for the extra large structures that is described as, and they even link to, Jamil Sorum's chain lightning Terran super weapon, which is, the implications of that are either really awesome, really scary, or both, and I'm just really interested in that.
Yeah,
that's a whole nother rabbit hole. But yeah, we talked about Jamil's super weapon again. I think in the first lore panel. So you can check that out.
Isogen 5. That's why we were discussing it, because it had to do with all of the stuff we were talking about with Thera.
Well, yeah, and in the first panel we went through all of the kind of key players, and Jamil was definitely and is still definitely a key player at the moment. Phi, you have something.
Yeah, it's also maybe interesting to note that the keys are called indexes, and that's a term that's not found in any of the items that I know of in EVE right now. But it's mentioned a number of times in the Gleaned information that the Jove were collecting information through some sort of spider, much like the spiders used in modern search engines.
Yes, that was the one that Ravis was mentioning earlier regarding AJ, was that there's an item from item 34880 from YC 114 March 20th, which is new research data collated source Aram Spider create new index.
At that point, for all intents and purposes, Archelon had shut down. So it's interesting that they came by, indexed it, or came by, spider crawled it, and created a new index when it was done.
That's very interesting. Okay, so a couple of other things that we wanted to note about the new wormholes. The new wormholes appear to be a new class region. Somebody who knows a little bit more about how the wormholes are organized than me, explain what that means and why it's significant.
I can take that.
Okay, go ahead.
So they're if you want to talk about the the class, the region, the letter, but I'll just say they're a new region of their own. It's only these 5 systems in it, and they fill 5 of what may either be 5 or 6 spaces left in the area where they've been putting in new systems, including Thera, the IDs. If you want to mention the thing you were going to.
Sure. So
actually, right before you do that, I'm going to chime in. This is about the 15-minute warning before we're going to shut all this stuff down. We do want to maybe get to some questions before we go. So if you have any questions for the panel or anything that you feel that we didn't quite go over, or follow-ups or whatever, right now is definitely the time to bring it up in Twitch chat, and we'll try to hit it before we shut down.
Sure. So to go back to the categorization of the wormholes, what you find is when you look at constellations and regions, they're not named, nice things like domain. Every region and constellation within W space starts with a letter -R-C, R for region, C for constellation, and some 5-digit number to list out which constellation or region you're in. All the class 1 wormholes are A, class 2 are B, class 3 are C, and so on. So you got A, B, C, D, and E are all class 1 through 5. Class 6 is F. And And that's the way it was for a long time until they added in the shattered wormholes. Most of the shattered wormholes got spread through those same class numbers, but Thera got its own. So Thera was a region G, and then the small shattered wormholes all got their own treatment as well, and they're in H. So the new systems that are currently on Sissy are all in K. So the interesting thing about this is number one, what Uriel was talking about earlier, that these 5 systems make up their own region all by themselves. The other piece is that they skipped I and J, and we're not really sure why.
Though one potential theory is that that's future-proofing, and they might be thinking to add like cruiser holes and that type of thing in the future.
Yeah,
I mean,
they
that's
may
my
want to add
personal
more
theory.
shattered holes that are specific to ship sizes.
Yep, absolutely. They just, for some reason, made a choice to skip I and J, and we don't have a good understanding of why that is.
I do find it kind of tongue-in-cheek in the fact that, non-wormhole space is known as K space.
Derp. Known space, though, starts with a K.
Sure. And then also, it seems that there are multiple entry points to any given one of these regions. So there's more than one system with a wormhole to the conflux, for example. And it's also worth noting that each of these wormholes have a new registration ID. For those of you who don't know much about wormhole space, you can actually kind of figure out where that wormhole is going to go by looking at its signature ID. There's different types of wormholes for different things. Most famous is the K162, which is kind of an exit wormhole, but there's also like specific wormholes that go to C5s or C3s or nullsec or lowsec. And it's always a letter and 3 numbers. But these are their own identities, and they've shown up in the database, and they're in these the unknown wormholes that you find with the drifters, and they correspond to the type of site that you will find inside. So the first letter is the name of the thing. So conflux is a C414, Sentinel is S877, so on and so forth. Now, while they all go to the same, all of the same wormhole goes to the same system. In other words, all S877s seem to go to the Sentinel system. We don't really know much about like how all that's going to work altogether. We do know that it doesn't quite work the way we think that it's going to work in the end in Sissy. Like, for instance, there's no exit wormhole, which doesn't seem to be the way it should be. But there's a lot of there's a direct correlation to the wormhole that we see in space, in the K space, and which system it leads to.
Yeah, we do have a lot of there's a lot of strange stuff going on at Sissy with this in particular. In its original incarnation, you could jump through these wormholes into these systems, and you could scan down the exit to go back, but there was nothing there when you got on grid. And then in the next release of Sissy, they deleted the wormholes effectively, so you couldn't use them anymore. So we don't know until they put them back whether they're going to be one way, whether they're not going to be one way, whether it's going to be one to many or just one to one. A lot of that stuff we still don't know yet, and we won't until they update Sissy and put the wormholes back.
One thing I will note, when I went into the Vedette, I made it a point to scan all of the sites that I found there. So I found a wormhole that led to a C3, and that wormhole actually did go both ways. So I was able to jump through out to the C3 and jump back into the Vedette wormhole. I also found
be a C2. They all have a single C2.
Was it a C2? Okay, yeah, my
Well,
bad.
here's a question for you, actually, Ash, since you brought it up. Well, what was it on your way out? Was the K162 on the Vedette side, or was it on the other side? Because
it was on the K162 was on the C2 side.
Okay.
Because I was able to determine it was a C2 before I jumped through. The other thing that I noted was I did scan down 2 signatures that both said that there were wormholes, and they led to nowhere. And the second one didn't show up until I was already there for about a half an hour. I noted,
Right.
I scanned down I scanned down both of the sites, checked out one. The one was where I was because it was the entrance wormhole, but it was empty. and then the other one was the C2. And then about 30 minutes later, I noticed there was a third signature. So actually, while we were waiting for the vidette to reset, I scanned it down, and it was another site that was there. It said that there was a wormhole, but there wasn't. So,
Right, and that's probably somebody else coming in. So what the hypothesis is that anytime somebody comes in, another one of those is spawned, and that's where we're getting the many to one hypothesis. The one that's constant is a D382 C2 static.
If I can just mention one little thing about that. The wormholes, I could imagine having multiple wormholes leading to what's supposed to be the same place would be maybe a little bit of an issue. I can imagine that would be more of a technical thing than anything right now, but we'll see with coming releases.
all right, and I think on that note, we're just gonna. Do we have anything else that we want to talk about before we wrap things up and kind of hit up some questions?
There's just one last thing that I want to throw in there, and that is I actually did, other than the sites that we've already talked about, each one of these 5 systems has 5 unique combat anomalies that are not found anywhere else in wormhole space. I did a post on that last week, and I'll throw out the link on Twitch.
Yeah, it's a really good one. There are a lot of interesting sites in the place. Some of them I think got shown by Lockfox, or at least one of them that looks. Anyway, oh wait, no, never mind. I'm silly. All right, so moving on. So we've got a couple of questions. If we still are accepting questions, so we'll just go through them. The first question. And I'm not going to even try to pronounce people's names, so we're just not even going to do that. So it was asked the glowing stuff in the towers. So Lockfox has been kind of roaming around in Sissy and kind of showing stuff off. And one of the things that we've noticed is that the Jovian observatories on Sissy seem to be even more damaged than before. And there is this bluish smoke coming out of them and lightning.
I know it's not even bluish. It's like pure RGB blue.
Yeah.
And so especially when you compare it to what they have on TQ right now, it's like you look at it and you're like, it has to be a bug. But on the other hand, the observatories have had that color smoke on CC since they started putting out the Carnix stuff,
which also coincides with adding the new shaders.
Right. So which is why it could be a bug, but on the other hand, it's been a couple of weeks now, so they're going to start to get cut it a little close. So why haven't they fixed it yet? If they haven't fixed it yet, it's possible that it's deliberate, but we won't know until we get closer to the release date.
And because Ash can't do it, this question was submitted by Orabi Denard.
Denard.
There's an extra syllable in there.
So, is there any implication as to what it would mean if it is one color or another? Like, why is there this smoke kind of coming off of it? And does it relate to kind of the new lightning effects that you can see inside of it too?
Lightning effects are there on TQ.
Yeah, they're there too. And if I can just say, in the Emergent Threats trailer, we see these giant clouds of green smoke around it. That's what makes me think it might just be a bug. But again, we don't know yet, so we'll see what happens.
One of the things that is interesting to note, I don't know if this is even relevant or whatever, but the first Jovian observatory I saw was actually in a Sancha incursion system, and so it was actually purple. It was still impacted by the Sancha kind of red tint. So that was a bit confusing, but it was actually because of the Sancha incursion. So it isn't necessarily. It is obviously being affected by like the normal shader effects. It's just they might be working with a default color. So it may not necessarily be a bug. It may just be a stand-in that they don't really care about because they can just change it at any time. All right. So there is the question that Fi, you're pointing out that Isogen is colored blue.
Yeah, so Isogen 5 is supposed to be an isotope of the standard Isogen that we use to build ships. And standard Isogen we know is blue. The super weapon that Jamil Sarum fired at the Minmatar Elder fleet was also a light blue. But we don't have any visual visual confirmation on what isogen 5 looks like. So it could easily be this darker blue, but all the evidence so far points to it being a lighter blue.
So that's what we got on that. Our next question is a doozy. So do we have any theories on what caused Caroline's star to explode? Now, before I hand this over to Ravis to answer, I will point out that we could probably go into this for easily 2 hours. And in fact,
we think, in the Rio lore panel.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. So for more information about that, please go see that. But do we have any new information? Do we have any new theories? Has any theories been confirmed or denied since that?
Not really. I mean, not much has changed with knowledge regarding Caroline's star. We really don't know anything more about what's happened there yet. But once we do, we can obviously just start making more tinfoil about it.
And I did post in chat the link to my post from last November on that topic. So feel free to go check that out. Keep in mind that it did not include the drifters because they weren't on the scene when I wrote that, but obviously they'll have some play in that story as well.
The one thing that is important to note is if Highland Tukas's recording is in fact older than 6 months, that means that that's a pretty strong confirmation that the drifters as an entity existed prior to the Caroline Star events as well.
And there remains the ongoing issue of the Sancha constellation in Shattered Wormhole space, so clearly there's some sort of invasion of some sort with the Sancha going on at that time, which Ravis touches on.
Yep. So no new theories, no disconfirmed theories or anything like that. We're pretty much where we were left off. So please review our previous videos for the answer to that question, or at least the speculations on that question. Okay. So, and then another big question that, is probably going to be a non-answer. Do the panel have any theories on who or what made the first drifter, or who or what started this whole thing? So if the drifters existed before Caroline Star, that's a pretty interesting point. But do we have any theories about who made the first drifter? Actually, let me ask it this way: do we have any
another
theories?
2-hour conversation.
Do we have any theories about who made the first drifter that isn't the other?
I did.
Shoot.
No.
He took credit.
Oh.
There's another theory that we've been toying around with here and there, that the drifters are actually meant to be automatons of sorts. One of the things that I've kind of tinfoiled around a little bit with is, were they built to be guards for the sleepers of some sort or another, or replacements for the caretakers, if you go back far enough in Jove lore, which we did in the previous lore panel. But in theory, they could be assistants to or replacements for the caretakers of the architects.
Actually, sorry to interrupt. Mac, didn't you and Ravis come up with like an interesting theory about, what was it? I think automaton.
Talos?
Yes.
Yeah, so this requires a slightly different than normal pronunciation of Talokan. If you pronounce it Talisen, or if you spell it into Google Translate and let them transliterate it to Greek, Google Translate then tells you that you've got a word Talos, which is to say, mythologically speaking, a gift from Zeus, who is in the Roman tradition Jupiter, or Jove, to Europa, the mother of Minos, who is the progenitor of the Minoan civilization, Minoan civilization being the one that was destroyed with the Thera eruption.
Which is right next door to Antikythera.
Yeah, there's also that. Alternatively, if you don't go with the Jupiter or Zeus interpretation of Talos, then alternatively, Talos is a creation of Hephaestus, again, a gift to Minos, the progenitor of Minoan civilization.
All right. Well, unfortunately, I think that's probably about where we have to cut things off. We have hit our upper bound, so obviously we're going to have to do this again sometime in the pretty near future. Also, we will continue to be updating any of the lore that we can find on our podcast, Hydrostatic Podcast, which, of course, puts out a new video every 2 weeks as much as we possibly can. I think we've been pretty consistent about that. Before we leave, does anybody have any final thoughts, shout outs, or whatever? We'll just go down the list. So we'll start with Adre.
Put me at the end.
All right, Ravis.
Yeah, I've got a couple of shout outs. First of all, thanks to the SSC guys who have been putting up with me doing a whole lot of lore stuff and therefore not being on as many things in SSC as I normally would be. Also to CCP Loki for continuing to do such awesome stuff with the videos. And of course, Falcon and Affinity and Delegate Zero for continuing to push on this stuff. It's great, and I appreciate it.
Thank you. Mac.
So I'm going to second all of the CCP shoutouts from all of us because Loki, Delegate Zero, Falcon Infinity, you're all awesome and we love you. And also have to say, Itsukame Zainu is recruiting, exploration, lore, roleplay for those who are keen. Check us out. And thank you for having us, of course.
Uriel.
Again, to, I guess, third, that thanks to CCP, Loki, Falcon, Affinity, Delegate Zero, all the guys and girls, everyone doing that, we love you. Thank you so much. And, let's see. Thank you to everyone who came on that first exploration through the, Drifter wormholes, and thanks to General Stargazer for catching me screaming about the hive, which was hopefully not as embarrassing as I'm thinking it was, but thank you nonetheless.
Anslo.
Shout out to CCP for doing all this stuff for player lore and getting people hyped about it. Shout out to the Router 109 team for helping me run this stuff because God knows I can't do it by myself. And that goes for the channels and for the forums at galacticnetwork.net/109. Thanks to Mac and Nico Zeno and Kyber and Miz and everyone else who's been helping me with the whole Drifter lore stuff. And shout out as usual to everybody at Scopeworks for putting up with my stuff and letting me be your FC, and Scopeworks is recruiting.
And Morwin.
I'm going to, again, echo the shout-outs to all the CCP folks who are making a big push toward, but I do want to specifically mention CCP Seagull because she has not been mentioned yet. She's a very, very big proponent of making lore and gameplay much more closely intertwined, and she's been a very big force for good lately. Also, since you guys did do a episode with Pi recently, I do want to give a small shout out to one of the MR role players, Samira Kerner, who is kind of a self-titled but very justified in this lore mistress for MR roleplay and lore. If you have questions about MR stuff, really you should go and talk to her because she knows her shit. And she's probably going to kill me for saying all that, but it'll be worth it.
Sammy's adorable, and she's probably going to kill me for saying that too. Damn.
Yeah.
Thirded.
Rip us.
All right. Well, Adre, do you got anything?
Yeah, this name sucks. I always get primaried. All right, so I would like to give a shout out to Otari Onzo and Liam Montelier, as well as Archon Serain, who have put together the Pakshi Peace Conference event, which is an RP event that's been happening for the last week or so, and they've been doing a great job running it, and it's really very accurate to how these kinds of things work. It's very like full of debates and speaking to the chair and stuff like that. So it's been a great event to watch unfold. And I want to give a big shout out to those guys because this is a hell of a lot of work. So thank you very much, guys.
Very cool. I would like to give a shout out to all of the people who come to watch us on Twitch. And for those of us who engage in our Reddit posts and who come to our tweet fleet for lore, all of the people that have really been part of this whole movement to make lore exciting again for the player base, as well as helping get people to know that there is such a thing as Hydrostatic Eve, and that we're here trying to make the lore, put the lore into perspective. So, thank you to those who support us on Patreon, who give out our link to people, to our lore panels, who engage with us on Twitter. You know, you guys are amazing. What started over a year ago as just a small project of, hey, let's find an excuse to sit down with some cool people and talk about Eve, has really grown to something that is far beyond what I originally envisioned. And really, it is thanks to you guys, the fans who have kind of directed our way and inspired us to kind of pursue this stuff. So, in a very amazingly real way, none of this would be possible without you guys. So, thank you to you guys. Locke, do you have anything to throw out there, Mr. I'm in a pod?
Scrub.
All right. Phi, why don't you finish this up? What do you got?
So I just want to say happy birthday to Eve, without which none of us would really be here. And I believe CCP Seagull's birthday is coming up on Thursday, so happy birthday to her. She's really put Eve back on the rails, so it's appropriate that their birthdays coincide.
Happy birthday, Seagull.
Absolutely.
Happy birthday.
Thank you to all of CCP who makes this all possible. Thank you to our panelists for coming here and trying to make sense of it all and adding even more tinfoil to the pile. Again, thank you for all of the listeners. I guess that should about wrap it up. So on behalf of Fyridian, Lockfox, myself, all of the panelists, and all of the people that kind of go to put this all together and make sure that we have answers to your guys' questions, thank you for listening to the Gleaned Information Lore Panel, and kill them before they kill you.